Black Hollow was a name people whispered, not spoke. A cold, forgotten village in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, blanketed in eternal fog and shadowed by thick woods that whispered when no wind blew. Most maps left it out. Those who left the village never returned. Those who stayed weren't always whole. Elias Thorne was the last exorcist, not by choice but by blood. His family had served as spiritual guardians of Black Hollow for generations. Priests, mediums, and warriors of faith, all gone, consumed by the darkness they vowed to fight. Only Elias remained, tired, scarred, and dangerously close to giving up. He lived alone in a stone chapel on the edge of the forest, surrounded by salt lines, runes, and old relics that pulsed with dying power. His days were filled with silence, his nights with screams. But something had changed. The darkness in Black Hollow was moving again. It began when a letter was left on the chapel steps, written in ash, folded with crow feathers. The girl is marked. The woods have chosen. The hollow awakens. The handwriting belonged to his brother Jonah, dead for 12 years. The girl's name was Clara, 17, pale, silent, and found walking barefoot in the forest at dawn, her skin covered in strange symbols carved with something sharper than knives. She didn't speak. She didn't blink. But she knew Elias. Her arrival marked the beginning. Crops died. Animals turned against their owners. The river turned black, thick like oil, and stank of rot. People dreamed of fire and a woman with no eyes who whispered riddles in their ears. Elias kept Clara hidden in the chapel, chaining her wrists in prayer circle symbols etched into the stone floor. Every night, her voice would change. Every morning, she would cry without remembering why. Elias knew she was possessed, but this was no ordinary spirit. This was old, ancient, a force buried long before Christianity even touched these hills. He began searching his family's forbidden texts, books bound in human skin, diaries written in blood. One name kept repeating, Ishael, the Black Hollow Bride. Ishael was a tale told only in dreams, a woman born from soil, married to the forest, and burned alive by villagers for birthing creatures with no eyes and no mouths. Her ashes were never found, her curse never lifted. And Clara was her vessel. Elias knew what this meant. There would be no simple exorcism. No Latin prayer could touch Ishael's soul. To stop her, he would need to go into the forest, into Black Hollow itself, and find where Ishael had been buried. But no one entered Black Hollow and returned. The woods were alive, and they were watching him. Elias prepared a ritual blade, blessed by fire and cursed by blood. He kissed the silver cross his mother gave him and stepped past the chapel's wards for the first time in years. The trees moved, not swayed, moved, like ribs closing in around a heart. The deeper he walked, the louder the whispers grew. His name, his sins, his brother's voice. And then he found it, a clearing of scorched earth with a single grave marked not by stone, but by screaming, a mouth in the earth that never closed, and beside it, Jonah's corpse, eyes wide, mouth sewn shut, still fresh. Before Elias could speak, the ground opened, and the bride rose. She did not walk, she hovered, her gown dragged across the soil like smoke, her face veiled with shadows that moved on their own. No eyes, no voice. But Elias felt her gaze pierce him like splinters driven into bone. The forest grew silent. Even the whispers stopped. Jonah's body began to twitch behind her. Strings of black root twisted from his mouth and into the earth, binding him like a puppet to something far beneath. He wasn't just dead. He was kept. The bride extended her hand. Clara, miles away, began to scream. Elias fell to his knees as visions flooded his mind. Children melting into the bark of trees, infants born with teeth and black tongues, villagers hanging themselves upside down, weeping blood. He saw Ishael, bride of the hollow, not punished, but sacrificed by her own kin to seal something worse. She wasn't the curse, she was the lock, and Clara was the key. The bride didn't speak, but Elias heard the command. Bring the girl. He staggered back through the forest, chased by shadows with too many limbs and no faces. The trees bled where his skin brushed them. Every step forward was a memory stolen. When he returned to the chapel, the doors had been torn from their hinges. Clara was no longer alone. The townspeople had come, drawn in their sleep. Dozens of them, eyes rolled back, chanting in tongues Elias didn't recognize. Some of them holding knives, others clawing symbols into their skin. Around Clara, the ground had cracked open into a spiral of bones. Clara floated, head tilted back, mouth wide. From her throat came Jonah's voice. You waited too long. The dead had gathered in the graveyard. Some were Elias's ancestors. Some were children he failed to save. Some wore masks of bark. Others had no faces left. They sang in low harmony, the sound of thunder through water, and the earth trembled with each note. Elias stepped into the circle. Salt burned under his boots. His blade, the last of his tools, began to hum. But it was too late for tools. He looked at Clara. Her body convulsed midair. Her skin cracked like old paint, and something inside her began to push out. The bride stood behind her, hands resting on Clara's shoulders, like a mother offering her child to an altar. End me, Clara whispered through blood, or she becomes the world. Elias raised the blade. His fingers shook, not from fear, but from knowing. This was never about saving Clara, never about stopping Ishael. It was about trade. One vessel for another, one thorn for another. He stepped forward and kissed Clara's forehead. She smiled, soft, even in pain. Then he turned the blade on himself. The bride did not stop him. She only watched. As Elias fell to his knees, blood soaking the soil, the runes around the chapel lit one last time. Clara dropped to the ground. The bride stepped forward. But before she could reach the body, a child's voice echoed through the forest. No. From the trees, another figure emerged. The figure was no taller than Elias's chest. Barefoot, skin pale as candle wax. Eyes completely black, reflecting no light. A small boy in tattered overalls, his hair damp with forest dew, stood between Elias's dying body and the bride. He didn't speak again, but when he raised his hand, the forest shivered. The bone choir fell silent. The bride paused, and then, for the first time since she rose, she tilted her head, not in threat, but curiosity. Clara stirred on the ground, coughing blood and soil from her throat. She looked up, dazed, eyes locking with the boy's. Her lips moved to form a question, but no sound came. Elias, still conscious, could barely lift his head. But he knew that boy, not from dreams, not from visions, from an old photo in the Thorne family crypt. The boy's name was Luther Thorne, born 1874, vanished in Black Hollow at age 7, never found. The boy Luther reached into his pocket and pulled out a rusted iron lantern. It glowed, not with fire, but with memories. Inside, flickering shapes moved like candle shadows. A burning village, a weeping woman in a red veil, something ancient dragging itself across a cold floor of bones. When the lantern opened, the wind screamed. The trees bent back, and the earth beneath the bride cracked like glass. She stepped backward for the first time. The light from the lantern bathed her in its glow, and within it, faces began to appear around her. Dozens, hundreds, trapped souls, children, priests, midwives, mothers. They were not hers but stolen, kept, and one of those faces was Jonah. He pressed his spectral hands to the glass and mouthed, "You must seal it." Elias tried to rise, blood soaking his chest. He reached for the lantern, his fingers brushing Luther's hand. The moment they touched, Elias felt himself split open, mind, body, and memory unraveling. He saw everything. There was something deeper than the bride. Beneath Black Hollow, beneath the soil and bones and blood, there lay the root, an ancient, pulsing intelligence older than words, a will that had no voice but many mouths. It grew beneath every house, every tree, every breath of air in Black Hollow. It used Ishel. It fed on grief. It whispered promises of resurrection, love, revenge, and then took everything. The bride was never evil. She was a weapon. Elias saw his ancestors one by one, sealing it again and again with blood, always at a cost. But this time, the root wanted out. Clara was the door, and Luther was the lock. Clara stood now, the carvings on her skin glowing faintly gold. She looked different, older, wiser, as if she now held memories, not hers. The bride knelt in front of her, not in reverence, in submission. Clara placed her hand on the bride's veil and lifted it. Elias didn't see what was underneath, but he heard Clara gasp, not in fear, but recognition. Clara whispered, "You're not her." And the bride smiled, a slow, terrible smile that reached no eyes. Then the forest began to collapse in upon itself. The world twisted. The ground beneath Elias and Clara shifted like breathing flesh, pulsing, groaning. Trees snapped backward as though pulled by invisible chains, their roots writhing like serpents. Luther's lantern dimmed. The bride was changing. Her veil turned to ash, revealing a face that was not a face, just emptiness, framed in bridal lace. Her smile widened unnaturally, cracking where no mouth had been. From her hollow visage came a sound like weeping from inside the earth. Clara clutched her head, staggering backward, whispering, "She's not alone. She's not alone. She's never been alone." The sky above Black Hollow bled red. Elias, barely clinging to consciousness, felt the hollow speak through him. Not in words, but in pressure. A deep, throbbing force pressing behind his eyes, squeezing his lungs, slowing his heartbeat to match some ancient rhythm below the soil. He saw flashes of other places. A cabin swallowed by moss. A man hanging upside down in a barn, still blinking. A mirror filled with eyes that weren't his. Then, a throne beneath the roots, built of bone, lit by veins, occupied by something sleepless. It watched, and it waited. Clara dropped to her knees, her hands crawling with black vines. Her veins darkened, her pupils blown wide. "She's giving me to it," she whispered. "No," said a voice behind them. From the edge of the chapel ruins, a figure stepped forward. He wore a black cassock, old and dust-covered, and bore a rosary wrapped in iron chain. His eyes glowed faintly, not holy but fierce. Not Elias, not Jonah, a third thorn. "Elias," the man growled, his voice gravel and thunder, "you never asked what happened to Uncle Thomas." Thomas Thorne, presumed dead in 1956, the exorcist who disappeared during the Red Winter of Black Hollow. He wasn't dead. He had become part of the hollow and crawled out when it opened again. With one motion, Thomas drove his rusted staff into the earth. A circle of flame burst to life around the bride. She screamed, 100 voices screaming at once. Luther vanished in a blink of light. Clara clutched her chest, now glowing from within. Something inside her was trying to escape. Thomas reached Elias, helped him up, and stared into the boy's eyes. "You are the last," he said. Elias coughed blood, whispering, "Then why are you here?" Thomas didn't smile. "Because last doesn't mean alone." Then he turned to Clara. "She can survive this, but only if you go in." In! Thomas pointed toward the center of the bride's broken body, now splitting apart into a spiral of shadow, an open wound in reality, leading down. The root mind wants you. The hollow wants you. It's always wanted a thorn. Elias hesitated, then took a step forward. Clara reached out, catching Elias's wrist. Her voice, barely audible, said, "If you go, you may not come back as you." Elias looked down into the spiral, where flickers of his own memories danced like ghosts. His mother's voice, Jonah's laughter, a dog that died when he was 12. Things no one else should know. The hollow wasn't calling him. It was reconstructing him. He let go of Clara's hand, stepped into the darkness, and fell. There was no bottom. Elias didn't fall. He descended. The hollow folded around him like wet cloth. Layers of memory stitched into shadow, pressing cold against his skin. He saw himself, but not himself. Other versions, walking other paths. In one, he never picked up the blade. In another, he wore the bride's veil. In the darkest, he had no eyes and preached to trees that listened. His descent slowed. The ground beneath him pulsed like living flesh. He stood in a cathedral of roots, black and endless, wrapped in the skeletons of things never human. The ceiling twitched with wings that didn't flap, just shifted, like thoughts too large to hold. At the center was a throne, and upon it something stirred. It did not have a shape, not at first, but as Elias stepped closer, it mimicked him, grew 2 arms, a face, features carved in reverse, like a statue chiseled from memory rather than stone. It opened its mouth, and Elias heard everything he had ever said in anger, all at once. The thing spoke in his father's voice, then his brother's, then in his own, layered and echoing. "You came to stop me, but I am you without guilt." Elias stepped forward, blade drawn, but the air thickened, turning to syrup, then ice. His lungs burned, his legs stiffened. The throne rose, and the root mind stood. Back above, Clara screamed. Her body twisted unnaturally, her limbs snapping into symbols as the runes under the chapel ignited, not with flame, but with blood. Thomas slammed his staff into the floor. A storm of ash burst into the air. The villagers, now puppets of the hollow, crawled from the forest, teeth filed, eyes sewn shut with vine thread. They surrounded the chapel in quiet worship. "Time is closing," Thomas muttered. "He has minutes, maybe less." Clara looked up. Her eyes were entirely black now, but tears still ran down her cheeks. She whispered, "I can still feel him." And somewhere below, Elias made a choice. The root mind offered no ultimatum. It simply opened. A dozen mouths speaking in forgotten languages chanted names not born yet. Images pressed into Elias's mind like brands. Cities consumed by trees. Rivers of mouths. A sun that screamed instead of shone. A chapel grown from living bone. And one vision lingered longer than the others. Clara, alone, sitting on the throne, smiling. The root mind leaned close, and in the voice of Elias's mother, it whispered, "Say yes." Outside, the sky cracked like glass. The birds fell dead from the air, their feathers burning mid-flight. The ground beneath the chapel yawned open. Vines as thick as arms slithered out, reaching for Thomas, for Clara, for the relics still pulsing on the altar. Then, a shock wave of silence, not soundless, but the absence of everything. Then a single heartbeat, and from the center of the chapel, where Clara once knelt, Elias returned, but his eyes glowed like coal, and his shadow didn't match his shape. Elias stood at the center of the ruined chapel, motionless. His skin was pale, dusted with ash. His clothes were torn but clean of blood. His eyes, once a soft, weary gray, now flickered with a dim orange glow, like dying embers. Thomas gripped his staff, jaw clenched. What did you bring back with you, boy? Clara stepped toward Elias, though her legs trembled. Her body still bore the symbols of the possession, but the glow had faded. The vines that had writhed beneath her skin now lay dry and brittle. The chapel had gone still. No wind, no sound, not even the breath of trees. Elias, she asked, her voice almost childlike. He turned his head slowly. Clara, he said. His voice was his, but behind it was something older, slower, like a memory speaking through a mouth. I made a bargain, he continued. Not with the bride, not with the root mind, with the thing deeper than them both, the thing they feared. Thomas lowered his weapon, suspicion etched in every wrinkle of his face. There's nothing deeper than the hollow. No name darker than Ishael's. There is, Elias said. It's not a god, not a demon, not even a spirit. It's what's left when a place forgets how to die. Elias stepped into the light from the ruined roof. The sun had returned, weak and cold. The hollow wasn't cursed. It was fed. All those years, all the blood, the rituals, the prayers. We weren't sealing it. We were feeding it, Clara whispered. But you stopped it? Elias looked at her for a long time, then nodded. Yes, I stopped the root mine. I took its place. Clara's breath caught. What does that mean? It means it can't leave, he said quietly. But neither can I. Thomas stepped closer. You're saying the hollow is still alive, but bound to you. Yes. And what about her? He pointed to Clara. She was the gate. Elias looked at Clara, and for the first time since returning, his eyes softened. She's free. Her bloodline's severed. She'll never be touched by this place again. The chapel began to groan. The ground beneath them pulsed. Roots black and slick emerged through the floorboards, coiling around Elias's feet, but not harming him. It's starting, he said. It wants to pull me back in. I can hold it. For now. Clara stepped forward, tears slipping down her face. You don't have to do this alone. I do, Elias said. You both need to leave. The forest won't touch you anymore. I bought that with everything I am. Thomas clenched his jaw. You'll become it, you know. Just like the bride. A story, a shadow, a warning. Elias nodded. But I'll remember, and I'll keep it quiet, as long as I can. Clara reached forward and touched his hand. He smiled, just briefly. Go. Then the earth split open. The chapel collapsed inward as if pulled by gravity that existed nowhere else. A vortex of black roots and pale light surged around Elias as he sank into the ground. He didn't scream. He didn't fight. He watched them until the last moment. Clara and Thomas ran from the wreckage, the woods parting silently for them. No fog, no voices. Just the distant rumble of something settling. Something asleep. Black Hollow was abandoned. Nature crept in like a patient sickness, rotting shingles, shattered glass, trees growing through kitchens and bedrooms. But no more whispers came from the woods. No more disappearances. Clara became a teacher, moved far away, kept no photos from her childhood, told no one about the chapel or the boy with fire in his eyes. But once a year, on the night the wind shifts coldest, she wakes in her bed, eyes filled with tears, remembering only two words, still holding. And somewhere beneath the earth, beneath root and stone, Elias Thorne watches the dark and waits.